joining. Like I had said, we're the detection dispatch with Anvilogic, and we have joining us today Raymie Michaels from eBay. Super excited to have her here and just talk about all things security engineering, detection engineering, and kind of a day in the life of what Raymie goes through and where you can start maybe asking questions of either your team or possibly if you're looking at the MITRE ATT&CK framework, how you can approach that and some different skills that Raymie's been picking up in her time at eBay. Before we jump in, I just wanted to also put in the chat, Raymie did speak at a conference that goes into a lot more detail in the weeds of how she's leveraging Anvilogic with eBay and Splunk. And so I just linked that in the chat for all of you who want to check that out maybe after. We'll probably have some follow-up detection dispatches specifically with Raymie that go a little bit more hands-on in the weeds, but we're going to stay at the day in the life of Raymie Michaels at eBay today. So Raymie, if you want to introduce yourself, let everyone know what you're doing today, how did you get here, and just kind of a rundown on what is your typical day.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jade, for that introduction. As she said, check out the link below or the link in the chat for the Splunk conference session that I did with Anvilogic's Rohith, and we were able to go into detail about how eBay leverages Anvilogic. So I'm Raymie, and I have been working at eBay for about 3.5 years now. I started as a security analyst in the CSERT team. So as you all know, it's like the 24/7 security operations center. And I was in the weeds working overnight from like 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. So I got a taste of that, of like what my now customers go through. So now I'm a detection engineer and I'm creating the rules for our analysts. And since I was in that world, I'm able to like have a better perspective on what they go through so that my alerts that I send out to them are high fidelity enough where there's no alert fatigue in the midst, and making sure that they are actionable and making sure that we have enough coverage to ensure the safety of eBay. And yeah, I think that's all.
Yeah, I mean, you're coming from a unique perspective from coming from the alert fatigue and getting maybe not great alerts, or rules set up. Is there anything that you've noticed now that you're on the other side helping analysts and, I think you called them your customers are, what have you maybe noticed that you didn't realize when you were on the other side, when you were an analyst?
So that's a good question, actually. It's when you're on the other side, you realize how you kind of need to put alert fatigue aside and maybe prioritize the eBay security, because a lot of the times we do get pushback from CSERT because we go to them to like give a background of our alert before we put it into their alert queue. And they'll get pushback saying like, we don't really think this is actionable. We don't really like think this is high fidelity enough. But on the flip side, it's like we were researching and working with threat hunters to make sure that this and we are sure that this alert is needed for like the safety of eBay. So we so yeah, look back on the detection engineering side, it makes you realize, okay, maybe we shouldn't be so strict on how high fidelity an alert needs to be, and we should like prioritize the security of eBay more.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is don't get too caught up in alert fatigue, and understand that really what the detection engineers and different parts of the organization are doing are really just trying to keep eBay secure and not necessarily chasing every single alert that's coming your way.
Yeah, it's a good balance that you need to find.
Nice. And you are a security engineer, detection engineer. A lot of people can use those terms interchangeably. Obviously, on paper, a detection engineer does a lot of different things. You wear a lot of different hats. And so can you break down a little bit just how you think of a detection engineer versus security engineer?
Yeah, so I'm sure as many other positions are well aware of, you wear multiple hats no matter what your title is. So on paper, we are detection engineers, and the definition of a detection engineer would be to write the rules for detections, or like to write the alerts that get sent to it could either be your team or to another team, the SOC team, to respond to those alerts. And that would be I guess that would be like the only thing that a detection engineer would do. But with eBay, and I'm sure with like many other companies, you have the opportunity and maybe the need, it's also a necessity to wear multiple hats and to not only write detections, but to be a threat hunter, to be an analyst, to be a log onboarder, to be in red team. So as a security engineer, that I think encompasses all of the above. And I think it's important to not limit yourself to your title, because everything else that you can do is going to help you with your day-to-day job, as well as like help you realize what you are really passionate about. And I think it's just fun to not have to like stick to one thing every day.
I love that. Not letting your necessary title define you, but everyone's working together as a team. And I think that's a really big piece of security that we're all trying to bring together. As there's more data, as there's more vulnerabilities, as everything's expanding, I think it's becoming more and more important for all of the different functions and all of the different teams. While you might have your own goals and, purview of the world, you definitely, I think our worlds need to come together a little bit more and get smaller and smaller. And for those of you just joining, I think we had a good group of you come in after the hour. This is Detection Engineering Dispatch with Anvilogic. Raymie Michaels has joined us from eBay to talk all things security, detection engineering, and a day in a life. So thank you for joining. If you have any questions along the way, pop them in the chat and we'll make sure to ask them. And definitely we'll bring you off mute and we can ask anything at the end or during, just raise your hand. But as we were talking about, all different teams have different goals, but the one overarching goal is to protect the business, like you said. So where do you find like collaboration? And that's really at the heart of kind of where Anvilogic started as well. But over my time in security, this has been, I think, one of the most critical and crucial things for everyone to do. Can you explain like who you collaborate with, who maybe is the most important group that you collaborate with, and how has that benefited?
Yeah. So collaboration, I guess, my answer is going to be specific to eBay, since we have like distinguished teams across our global information security organization. So I will like focus it on eBay, I guess. So you have to collaborate with many teams. Every day, like I said, our customers are CSERs, so we are collaborating almost every day, if not every day, with them to make sure if there's incidents that are ongoing, we help them with that. If there are alerts that need tuning, we respond to that right away. So we need to collaborate with them to understand like the health of the alert queue that they're dealing with. Like we mentioned before, we don't want there to be alert fatigue, and we need to make sure the balance is there, that we have actionable and alerts that will make eBay secure. And besides that, we have our threat hunters that we collaborate with when they're getting their threat intel and thinking about what eBay might be vulnerable to. They'll talk to us about it, they'll let us know, and maybe give advice on how we can like implement it in our environment, and then we'll go ahead and like work with them to get that as an alert. And then there's also collaboration with our log onboarding teams, because while we do have a lot of like sources already, there's always more. There's always going to be like new logs that we can monitor. There's always going to be like a new threat intel feeds that we can leverage for our existing alerts or to create a new alert. So that's another team that we work closely with is the log onboarding team. And we ensure that in our internal sim or in Splunk, the logs are coming into there cleanly, I think, if that makes sense, like so that we can like work on them. And we let them know exactly how to, I guess, like extract all the fields, so that we can like work with those logs. That's another team that we work closely with. And then I guess in like the wider sense of things, there are like our application security team that we work with, or just like the engineering team that we work with to make sure that they're focused on security, since that's not what they're going to be thinking of first and foremost every day, since they're more thinking about how to get out there, amazing like code out. So it's good to like work with them. And if there's the start of a project, security likes to get in there quickly to make sure that they're thinking about security before completing that project or before like engineering that project. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of collaboration. Collaboration is very necessary.
I think one thing that comes along with collaboration, and you were saying, everyone does have specific goals, and so some people might not be as security minded or, not related to security. So, how are some maybe tips or tricks of how maybe you get them thinking about security, or maybe some of the challenges, even with other security teams that you've encountered, that where you've been able to implement collaboration, maybe where that wasn't happening before?
Yeah, so I like to make sure that I'm not like we can't be too hard on them because it makes sense that they're very focused on getting their deadlines met, and their mind is like different than a security engineer's mind. So the thing that helps the most is just to like, I think, to overshare and to be there as soon as possible. So like, oh, by overshare I mean like give them exactly the concerns that you have, or give them some like red team campaign that has happened before to like show them how this can be exploited. Give them as much information as possible and as much background as possible for like the security vulnerabilities, or like or even like for remediation, so that they understand and they're not like, oh, the security team is like a weird like CIA type thing that doesn't that doesn't like tell us what they're doing. So yeah, it's good to overshare and to get in there as soon as possible. And then again, with balance, you don't want to we have like some processes that they need to go through before completing their project to simplify things, but you want to make sure like the processes are not too like there aren't too many processes that like stop them from doing their work. So as much as you want to overshare and like give as much security background and advice as possible, you also need to make sure it doesn't like hinder the business from, running business as usual.
Yeah, you do hear that a lot, oh no, the security team's coming at me. We're gonna get into a roadblock. We can't keep things moving forward. So that's definitely a good thing to be aware of. And is there any specific maybe examples of a time where maybe, just a little bit of process has gone a long way where people aren't scared to work with the security team?
Yeah, we have amazing teams that like they I guess create the process for us, where it's kind of like a questionnaire that you fill out. So if there is a new project, they can automatically like fill out, like on Jira or whatever, the predefined questions that we have. And then we give them like background on how long the approval would take and that type of thing. So we make sure that there is the process there, but it's not hindering like their work.
Yeah. And I think maybe a big important piece of this is not just the upfront, but kind of the output of it. Like not just them answering these questions, but what happens on the other side, and helping everyone understand what you are working on, and what are your goals, and where are you accomplishing things that people have requested, and maybe going into a little bit of your own team branding or marketing, if you will. And working across leadership, if you can maybe go into detail on if you guys do that and if that's something that's worked well for you.
Yeah, so something that comes to mind where I guess I can explain that is, I can't go into too much detail, but let's say like is an incident that happened. So if there's an incident that is affecting like a certain part of eBay, so the security team has to like work with other leadership teams or with other engineering teams to help fix that incident. So in that case, it's I guess our CSERT team, the whole security team, that's a good opportunity for us to brand ourselves because we are like actively protecting eBay and like making sure that we all keep our jobs, there's no breach, and everyone understands that because when they see like the real life example of an incident happening and when they help with it, so when they like give their assistance to the security team when we need to, they have more confidence and more understanding of like what the CSERT team goes through or what all of security goes through to ensure that eBay stays secure.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's a super important thing. And, obviously you're inundated with a lot of different things. I know everyone on the call has dealt with it. Just setting priorities, knowing what's important, what's not. What does that look like or mean to you? And how do you actually manage your priorities? And like, what are those goals that you would be trying to hit?
Yeah. So I like to be organized. I like to like write to-do lists and use a planner or use like an the Microsoft Note or whatever, OneNote. So I like to stay organized and I like to like use the tools that we have internally, like Jira, to like make sure that you're giving yourself a ticket as a reminder for what you need to do. And then I like to create a dashboard for myself of all the tickets so that I can look at them and then just determine for that day, because it changes every day sometimes, what is the highest priority and like what I need to work on. And like you said, you need to be organized, but in security, you also need to be agile, as everyone knows. So while your priorities may change every day, it could also be that something new comes in and whatever you had prioritized is now at the bottom of the list because you're focusing on the new thing. And I think it's important to not be like discouraged when there is like a shift in priority or like a shift in what you need to do. And then just realize that when there is like that new thing or there is like an incident that you need to jump on, from there, a lot of good things stem. And from there, like you'll have a new set or like a new to-do list that's maybe updated and your old priorities can also like go into that new to-do list, but you're realizing, okay, this can maybe like come off of my to-do list because as we have seen in this incident, this is what is important. This is what like, red team can attack, or this is what like some external person can like exploit. So it's good to not be very rigid. It's important to stay organized, make sure you know what you have to do, but also be flexible and be open to having things, disorganize you.
Totally. Everything shifts, right? Like whether it's a incident, a 0 day, anything popping up, I'm sure you're having to be flexible, but maybe being able to go back to that organization and being able to go back and work some of the new things into that organization kind of keeps you on track is what it sounds like. How often do you find that there are things taking you away, or maybe a better question is, have you done anything or implemented any organizational things that maybe have helped you stay more focused and prioritized? And so you can still be flexible, but maybe a little bit more proactive as well.
Yeah, so that we have a very good I guess process for our alerts of mapping to MITRE, and that's a time, sorry. Oh, that's a time where you can use, what's already available. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can use the MITRE map. You can like look at all the techniques and find specifically where you have gaps. And luckily, like Anvilogic has a very nice, helpful tool for showing you where you have coverage on the MITRE map. So it's easy to go into Anvilogic and like see, oh, okay, this initial access, like valid accounts. We haven't really touched on that yet, but we need to because it's something that Red Team has used in the past. So let me see what detections I can create from there and then create them And then now we are covered in that area. Now let's move on to another technique in MITRE. So the MITRE mapping is very helpful in that, and it helps us, like it's good to prioritize within there, and you know that it's kind of going to stay like as constant as possible, I guess. Like it those techniques are always going to be something that you need to cover. So that's a helpful way to like stay, I guess, organized with in the detection side specifically.
Yeah, I mean, the MITRE being around for a while now, I think being able to actually operationalize and see your MITRE coverage is definitely something that I think everyone probably on this call is doing. And if you're not, let's have a conversation about that. But so can you give me any examples? Maybe, you're talking about the CSERT team in collaboration with, the red team and things. Like, are there any specific areas of the MITRE attack framework or your MITRE attack coverage that you feel like is kind of the top, right? Like, if you think of the CSI top 20 or whatever, like, are there things that you always go back to with the MITRE coverage that
Yeah,
you can talk about?
yeah, that's true. I would say the very front, the very beginning, so like the initial access and the very end. Those are two things that we like to focus on. So if there's exfiltration, we like to make sure there's not only detection on that, but like preventative measures for that. And then for the initial access. So like for the easy, like low hanging fruit, like for brute forcing or credential spraying, like that type of thing. That's where we used to like focus a lot on, but now that we have like coverage on that, we kind of move on to exfiltration or somewhere in between. And I guess that could be like advice for people who are just starting is to start in the beginning, as simple and as obvious as that sounds, because it is going to be like the first step. And if you can prevent the first step, then it makes it harder for the attacker to continue. And when they see like there's a hard time, then they kind of get a little bit discouraged and maybe we'll go on to like the next company to, attack.
Definitely. The least path of least resistance is typically what we all know as an attacker's path. And so whatever you can throw in their way. And it's good to hear that that's still the case, even with the amount of changes or different, expanding a threat and attack surface. These things are still kind of the foundational principles of make sure the initial access is removed and make sure you're watching data exfiltration and account takeovers. Obviously, I think that when it comes to data exfil and just account takeovers in general, and you're talking about not being too rigid in your detections, is there anything you're implementing like automation or maybe machine learning or anything that that helps you so you're not having to always jump back in
Yeah,
and do it yourself?
we work with our automation team very closely. I guess that was a collaborating team that I forgot to mention, but when we are creating an alert, we like to think right away before even like pushing it out. How can we automate this? Like, how can we make CSERT's life easier? To maybe like automatically send an email to the user's manager to make sure nothing fishy is going on. Or to this is something like Anvilogic does as well as like to correlate multiple alerts or correlate multiple like actions taken that may not be super high fidelity, but when correlated together, they are high fidelity. And like I said, Anvilogic does that with the scenario building. So that is a way that we just make the CSERT's tasks of having to look through multiple IOCs and to just being one alert that they get sent to their queue, and they can already see like the path that has been taken.
I
As
love
for
that.
machine learning, we're still like going into there, but it would be nice to say, we have AI that just creates the detections for us. But every environment is different, so it's hard to ensure that all of our different logs are useful when I don't know if that could be like automated, at least not yet. Like once ML gets way up, like way more advanced, maybe they could be able to like find all the different types of logging that we have and how to grab it and how to like correlate it into an alert and like find anomalies in there. But until then, we or maybe like just leveraging machine learning with in the future we have something in the pipeline of inputting like a certain sources and then asking, okay, where is the anomaly here? Or where can I like find more information on this specific like alert? So that would be
Nice.
something that like CSERT can use and just make their lives easier.
Yeah, so it sounds like you guys are taking steps to implement, and someday when things are a little bit more advanced, we're gonna let them take over and build all the detections for us. But could you go into detail? So until that day comes, could you go into like a little bit of your general process to develop detections from scratch?
Yeah. So we like to either get some intel on like a new app that eBay is creating and then find logs that we can grab from that app and then see the penetration testing like results and what is exploitable in that app. And then work with our onboarding team to get the app logs and then to write the detection and then and like test it out, ensure that it's high fidelity, ensure that it's not, there's no false positives and that type of thing, to send to CSERT. So that's like one path that comes forward for us. If there's like a new app, or if we have existing logs, but there's like a new 0 day or a new something from Intel that gets sent to us, then we'll use our existing logs, but from there just do all the research and find out what fields we can use for that alert and then create an alert from there. And then another way is like I mentioned before, of seeing like where the gaps are in the MITRE map and then going on Anvilogic and finding the detections for those like specific techniques or creating scenarios for that. And making sure for all of these, making sure that everything is relevant to like your environment, so to eBay's environment. Um, and then we sprinkle in like preventative measures there because while detection is good, it may mean that you're only detecting after the fact. And if you can prevent something, that's even better. So it's important to also see where you can prevent things, um, or like automatically, block things. And then like I guess the last one would be if there's an incident, then creating rules to, mitigate that incident or to prevent that incident from ever happening again.
Would you say that along that kind of process, testing take like what part takes the most time? Is testing something that kind of goes around in circles, or maybe what takes the most time, and maybe where have you been able to jump in and kind of improve that process?
That I testing does take a while. Um, because you want to make sure like if you can't write the test on your own, then you're reaching out to red team and you need to make sure they have cycles to help you. And then if you can test and you do test, but the alert doesn't trigger, then you have to like rework it. And it's maybe like a cycle. So the cycle of testing and reworking can take a while depending on how advanced and sophisticated the alert is. So that does take a while. I think you should spend the most time researching and making sure that whatever alert you're creating is relevant and is going to help like keep eBay more secure, and that comes from researching. And when you're researching, you're also like finding different avenues to help make that alert that you're creating more sophisticated so that it's not just looking at like firewall logs, but it's also looking at like the app logs after the firewall logs or like the proxy logs, and that way is making the alert higher fidelity and just more sophisticated, as I said. So I would say a lot of time can be spent in research for the like in the research phase. And if you don't have the logs already, so if this is like an alert that you're creating from scratch and you need to onboard some logs too, that can also take a while. That's when like collaboration comes into play. You need to have the relationship with the onboarding team so that they trust you to realize, oh, okay, or they need to reprioritize. And I trust Raymie to understand that I should reprioritize. Like what she needs is going to help keep eBay safe. So I need to like spend some extra cycles to get those logs onboarded. So there's yeah, so I would say like research and testing would take the most time.
General collaboration. Sounds like just your job takes a long time. No, no, there's every piece of it, there's going to be different things along the way. And so it sounds like you've created a really good process for how to engage with other teams at the right times to ensure you're getting what you need, they're getting what they need as well as everyone keeping eBay safe. So that's really at the end of the day the biggest goal, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I know that and I think that the piece that you brought up, I think is so important that I don't hear enough people saying maybe. A lot of people leave their research to the research team and kind of things getting thrown over the fence. And I think more and more I'm hearing that people are jumping into research, but it sounds like, you really, if you lean in and kind of create that research as part of your hobby as a detection engineer or a security engineer, that's going to exponentially help not only you grow in your career, but also just do the job and keep eBay the safest as they can.
Yeah. Research I would say is like very important. It goes back to like the first conversation of what's a security engineer and what's a detection engineer. You can be a good detection engineer without researching, because you can just get some feeds from the other teams whose job it is to research. Or you can be a security engineer and like a better detection engineer by researching on your own and finding new exploits on your own and finding ways to like to make that one alert even better by like researching on your own. And it's good to not be very like narrow-minded, because when you're researching, they like those articles are not specific to eBay. So they're going to be mentioning like a whole bunch of other things that you might not have thought of. Or they're going to be mentioning like some different log source that eBay doesn't have. So it's good to like get external research in there. And like all the different everyone knows like all the different kinds of threat feeds in there. Like I think Anvilogic also, the threat intel from Anvilogic that comes into like or to the Slack is very helpful too. Or even into the emails. Because you're realizing that this isn't just like specific to eBay. There's going to be something else out there that, is going to help improve eBay security.
Yeah. And for those of you out there who would like to join, we do have emails as well as a Slack where what Raymie was talking about. We send out every Tuesday kind of a recap of, not even just a recap, but trending threats and topics that are coming out that you might want to be considering and making sure you're covered for. So our Forge team is doing an excellent job at keeping those kind of top of mind for everyone. So it takes out some of the research work for you. So gives you at least a spot to start in some of your research. Um, while we're going to wrap up here real quick, I do want to, for those that might have not grabbed it, I am putting in the chat again the conf session that Raymie and Rohit over at Anvilogic did at Splunk conference. It really goes into detail on the things that she talked about with the, how are you building a detection? How are you correlating and all of that? How are you bringing in detections that you currently have and making sure you're correlating across all of the different things? So definitely check that out. It's a really good session. And then Raymie, I think we'll end it on, what's something that we haven't covered that just like is a passion of yours in security or your daily job that you think everyone, maybe it's a best practice, maybe it's a shout out to eBay, whatever it is. If you could just go into detail about maybe just give us something to end on.
Sure. So, I haven't touched on it, but it's important to kind of evaluate where you are in your career and where you want to be in your career, and then find the company that will help you with that. So, when I started, you don't know much about security, so you have to so I started at eBay, which is a company that is very, very helpful with collaboration, like, within your team to help guide you and like give you advice and like that you can learn from. There's not a lot of like processes that hinder you from, wearing the multiple hats so that you can like learn different things. Like if you're starting, people say it's good to go to a startup because you're able to learn so many new things. So I would say like my advice is evaluate where you are in your career and find a company that can help you get to where you want to be. So find one that helps you learn if you're just starting. Find one that helps you, I don't know, if you're not just starting, if you want to specifically like focus on one thing, then maybe find like a bigger company that has that specific team so that you can focus on what you're passionate about. And yeah, don't be afraid to interview the company that's interviewing you.
I love it. I want to thank you all for joining us. We're waiting for any questions to come through. We do have February 1st, our next detection dispatch. Omer Singer and Tim Frazier are going to be joining us to be talking about all things detection engineering as well. So that'll be a good session you don't want to miss.
Feel free to reach out on LinkedIn if you have any specific questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Raymie, thank you very, very much. Always a pleasure to get to chat with you. Can't wait to see the rest of your growth at eBay and beyond.
Thank you so much. That was awesome.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.